He walked into the room, and silence followed him. No one dared to speak. No one dared to breathe. In this company, fear had a name, and it wore a tailored suit. But one day, a new girl showed up, and when he tried to intimidate her like he did with everyone else, she spoke, calmly, boldly, fearlessly. And in that moment, everything changed. This is the real story behind the title. They all stayed silent around him, until the new girl spoke without fear. And what you're about to hear will take you through betrayal, power, revenge, and something much deeper than all of that. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, not just to follow stories like this, but because every story here reminds you of the power of courage, even when you're surrounded by silence. And tell me in the comments, what city are you watching this from right now? I read every comment, and your city might get a shout out in the next video. Now take a deep breath, because this story will stay with you. Rain slashed against the glass windows of the towering Del Valle Industries building like an omen. The storm outside, however, was nothing compared to the storm that raged inside. Not in the sky, but in a conference room on the 27th floor, where silence was a shield and breathing too loudly could cost you your job. Or worse. The clock read 8:01 a.m., 1 minute late, and that 1 minute was all it took for the air to thicken with dread. A low click echoed as the glass doors opened. Leather shoes tapped cold marble with ruthless precision, like the ticking of a bomb about to go off. He didn't need to speak. His presence alone carved fear into the bones of everyone in the room. A man in his 60s, gray-haired and respected throughout the financial world, accidentally met his gaze and instantly looked away. A young intern dropped her pen and nearly cried. The man walked slowly to the head of the long conference table. He was elegance carved in stone, sharp suit, tailored to the edge of cruelty, eyes colder than the storm outside, a mouth that rarely smiled, and when it did, it meant someone else would suffer. He stopped, then spoke, low, deliberate, venom-coated. "Do you think," he said, looking at no one and everyone at the same time, "that time bends to your incompetence?" No one answered. No one ever did. He reached into his pocket and placed a golden watch on the table, ticking loud like a judge's gavel. Then, without warning, he turned to the man on his left. You were late. 1 minute. Explain." The man trembled. "Mr. Del Valle, there was traffic and..." "Do you think traffic gives a damn about your salary?" "I know, sir." "Then why should I?" The man opened his mouth again, but Alonso Del Valle was already walking out, his judgment delivered in the echo of his footsteps. The meeting would continue, without the man, who was already clearing his desk before the coffee turned cold. That was Alonso Del Valle. The name whispered like a curse in every hallway, feared more than death, and more absolute than God, at least inside that building. But that was before she walked in. At exactly 10:04 a.m. that same morning, the elevator chimed on the ground floor. She stepped out, mid-20s, coat soaked from the rain, wide eyes scanning the room with naive curiosity. She looked like someone who still believed people could be good, like someone who hadn't yet met the devil in human form. The receptionist didn't even bother to look up. "You're late," she mumbled, chewing gum, clicking her nails against her phone screen. "I had an interview with HR at 9:30, the woman replied, removing her wet scarf and brushing hair from her face. "I got lost." The receptionist raised an eyebrow, finally glancing at her. "Then you're really lucky they didn't cancel. Mr. Del Valle doesn't hire people who can't follow a GPS." The woman smiled nervously. "Then it's a good thing I don't plan on getting lost again." "Uh-huh," the receptionist said, unimpressed. "Take the elevator to 26. You'll find the orientation room at the end of the hall. If no one's there, wait. And don't, I repeat, don't go up to 27. "Why not?" The receptionist leaned in with a sarcastic smirk. "Because that's where dreams go to die." As the elevator rose, the woman checked her reflection in the mirrored wall. Water still clung to her eyelashes. Her blouse was slightly wrinkled, but there was something in her eyes, not just nervousness, something sharper, determined, like someone who had nothing to lose and no intention of following anyone's rules but her own. The doors opened on the 26th floor. The hallway was eerily quiet. Too quiet. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. A paper fluttered across the floor from a gust of air, the only sign of life. She followed the corridor to a door marked orientation. Inside, two other new hires sat nervously at a table, flipping through folders like they were sacred texts. They looked up as she entered. No one smiled. "I guess we're the lucky ones," she said, trying to sound lighthearted. "Still alive." They exchanged awkward glances, but said nothing. Then the door behind her opened again, and someone entered with the force of a thunderclap. Not Alonso, but someone nearly as cold. Phones off, mouth shut, eyes up, barked a woman in a pencil skirt and blood-red heels. "I am Miss Calderon. If you want to survive here, listen and never speak unless spoken to. Any questions?" No one dare raise a hand. "Good. Mr. Del Valle will not tolerate weakness. You are here to execute, not to exist. If he calls you, you answer. If he dismisses you, you disappear. And above all," she paused, letting her heels click once across the marble, "you never, ever contradict him." But one pair of eyes, sitting quietly at the edge of the table, didn't blink. She was already writing the rules in her mind. Not to follow, but to challenge. Her name wasn't known yet, but would be. Isadora had just arrived, and the hurricane was about to begin. The wind outside screamed against the windows, but the real storm was brewing on the 27th floor. The first time Isadora saw Alonso Del Valle, it wasn't planned. She wasn't supposed to be there. In fact, she had been told, explicitly, to never step onto that floor unless summoned. But life rarely waits for permission. Miss Calderon had handed her a sealed folder and said, in a whisper barely above venom, "Take this to accounting." Not a word, not a mistake, not a detour. Isadora nodded, pressing the folder to her chest and walking toward the elevators. But as she approached, the 27th floor button blinked red, as if calling her. She hesitated. The voice in her head, the one she had learned to listen to over the years, whispered, "If you want to change your life, stop being afraid to quem age como dono do mundo." So she pressed the button. As the elevator ascended, her fingers tightened around the folder. Her reflection stared back at her, calm on the outside, but inside, 1,000 thoughts raced. Memories of her mother's hands shaking from exhaustion, of the eviction notice folded under the mattress, of her sister's hospital bills piling up like a death sentence. She had come here for a job, but more do que isso, ella tinha vindo por justica, and justice didn't wait in hallways. The elevator doors slid open with a hush, revealing a floor that felt like another universe. No laughter, no movement, just silence dressed in luxury. Black marble floors, glass walls, steel accents, and a chilling lack of humanity. The kind of place where emotions go to suffocate. She stepped out, trying to look like she belonged. At the far end of the corridor, a voice erupted. Loud, clipped, furious. "How do you run a division with 2 brain cells and a goddamn paperclip?" The door to the main boardroom was ajar. Isadora's eyes narrowed. She was supposed to turn left, to accounting, but her feet moved forward, toward the sound. She saw him, back turned, standing tall in front of a wide glass window overlooking the city, arms crossed behind him like a general on a battlefield. His voice carved through the room like a blade. "I give you everything. Resources, talent, time. And you give me failure." A trembling man, probably in his late 30s, tried to speak, but the words collapsed in his throat. "You had one job," Alonso continued, "to finalize the deal with the Korean partners. Instead, you gave them doubts. You showed them weakness. You embarrassed me." Silence. Then, coldly, "You're done. Security will escort you out." The man didn't protest. He simply nodded, defeated, and stood to leave. That's when Alonso finally turned and saw her, standing in the doorway, watching. She didn't flinch. Alonso narrowed his eyes, like a predator registering an intruder. "Who are you?" His voice wasn't loud, but it cut deeper than any scream. Isadora stepped in. "I'm new. Orientation." She held up the folder. "I was told to deliver this." Alonso didn't move, didn't blink, just stared. The room was frozen. The departing employee paused behind her, as if witnessing something forbidden. "This floor," Alonso said, taking a slow step toward her, "is restricted. No one comes here unless I ask for them. Are you telling me you can't follow basic instructions?" The folder trembled in her hand, just slightly. "I was told to be efficient," she said. "You seem like someone who appreciates that." A pause. Deadly. Then, What's your name? Isadora. Last name? Just Isadora. He tilted his head, almost amused. We don't do nicknames here. It's not a nickname. It's my name, and I don't plan on being here long enough for anyone to forget it. The air shifted. A few employees still seated at the conference table stared at her like she had pulled the pin from a grenade. Alonso's jaw clenched. For a moment, it looked like he would explode, but instead, he laughed. Soft, cold, dangerous. You've been here less than a day, and you're already giving me attitude. No, Mr. Del Valle, I'm giving you honesty. You seem like someone who's surrounded by fear. I figured the truth might be refreshing. No one breathed. The silence screamed. Alonso stepped closer, now inches away. She smelled his cologne, sharp and expensive. His eyes were ice, but her spine held. Be careful, Isadora. Courage is only admirable when it's backed by competence. Otherwise, it's just noise. Then I guess we'll both find out which one I am. She handed him the folder. He took it. Their hands touched, a spark neither acknowledged. Leave. Gladly. She turned and walked out, shoulders straight. Behind her, no one said a word. But something had shifted. The tyrant had been challenged. And for the first time, he hadn't won. The building buzzed, but not with the usual sound of ringing phones and rapid typing. No, the buzz that spread through Del Valle Industries that afternoon was something electric. It crawled through elevators, whispered across hallways, and spilled from break rooms like smoke from a fire no one could locate. Did you hear what happened on the 27th? She talked back to him. She's not even a full employee yet. Is she crazy or just trying to get fired? The name Isadora had left Alonso's lips just once, but that was enough. She had gone from invisible to infamous in less than 3 minutes. But while the employees whispered behind coffee mugs and half-closed blinds, the man at the center of it all sat alone in his office, staring at the folder she delivered, unopened. Alonso Del Valle wasn't accustomed to being challenged. His life was a fortress built on power, fear, and control. He didn't argue. He commanded. He didn't negotiate. He dictated. And yet, there she was, a name with no surname, a face he couldn't erase, a tone of voice that lingered in his mind longer than he wanted to admit. He poured himself a drink, ice clinking against the crystal glass, but even the scotch felt weaker today. What was it about her? He replayed the moment, the defiance in her voice, the steadiness of her gaze. She didn't tremble. She didn't stutter. She looked at him like a man, not a monster. That was new, unacceptable, fascinating. He hated that word. Fascinating. It belonged in art galleries and novels, not in boardrooms. Meanwhile, Isadora sat alone in the employee lounge, picking at a dry sandwich, pretending not to notice the stares. Every now and then, someone would try to get close. Hey, you're the new girl, right? What was it like? Standing up to him. Are you planning to sue, or just get murdered? She answered with a tight smile and silence. Not because she had nothing to say, but because she had learned that people didn't want truth, they wanted theater. Let them talk. Let them speculate. She knew who she was, and she hadn't come for fame. She came for something much older, much deeper, something with roots. Flashback. A girl, age 11, stands outside a hospital room. Her mother is inside, too weak to speak, tubes crawling from her veins. Across the hall, a man in a suit argues on the phone. Loud, rude, unbothered. Look, I don't care what the settlement says. She signed the papers. She knew the risks. The girl watches him, memorizes his voice, the tone, the cruelty. If she dies, that's not my fault. That's business. In flashback, Isadora blinked. Back in the present, the sandwich untouched, the memory still burning. That night, as the building emptied and the lights dimmed floor by floor, Alonso remained. His office was silent, but his mind was not. He opened her HR file. Minimal information. No family listed. No previous work in finance. No college pedigree. Yet her test scores through the roof. Problem solving. Strategy. Leadership. She's no idiot, he muttered. Then something caught his eye. A note from HR. Recommended for placement in junior division. Applicant insisted on being placed in executive rotation. Refused to explain further. He smirked. Of course she had. He stood and walked to the window. The city blinked below like a circuit board of dreams. There was no place in his world for idealists. They burned out. They broke. And yet, For the first time in years, he didn't feel bored. She had turned the air electric. The next morning, she found her desk relocated from a shared cubicle on the 26th to an individual workspace directly outside Alonso Del Valle's office. The message was clear. He wasn't done with her, and she was exactly where she wanted to be. The desk was pristine. Too pristine. A single pen, a sleek notepad, a nameplate, Isadora. No last name. Just that. Like a silent rebellion carved into metal. When she arrived, the air was different. Tense, charged, like the atmosphere before lightning strikes. She could feel the eyes from secretaries, assistants, even executives walking past, flicking toward her with barely contained disbelief. She sat down, straight-backed, composed. But inside, she knew this wasn't a promotion. It was a test, a trap, or both. Alonso hadn't spoken to her since the incident in the boardroom, but his message echoed without words. Placing her outside his office wasn't an invitation. It was a spotlight, and she was now under surveillance. At 9 a.m. sharp, his office door opened. He didn't greet her, just tossed a thick folder onto her desk with surgical precision. Prepare a summary. 10 minutes. She opened it. 47 pages of dense financial data, mergers, losses, projections. The kind of report that would normally take an hour to digest. 10 minutes. Not a request. A weapon. She took a breath. Began reading. Fast. Her mind segmented numbers into patterns, her fingers moving over the keyboard like a pianist at war. At exactly 9:10, she stood and knocked on his door. Come in. He didn't look up, just gestured toward the chair. She sat, calm, controlled. Summary, he said. Your Brazil acquisition is hemorrhaging. 40% drop in Q3, mostly due to currency instability and local labor laws. The recommended solution here is downsizing. I disagree. Alonso finally looked at her. Sharp, curious. Why? Because your problem isn't cost. It's trust. Your local CEO is cutting corners and bleeding morale. Fire him. Replace him with someone internal. Stabilize from within. Then scale. A beat. A silence heavy enough to crush lesser men. And you figured all that out in 10 minutes? 8. I used the last 2 to decide if it was worth saying out loud. The side of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but something alive beneath the mask. Not bad. She rose to leave. Sit. She obeyed. He poured himself a glass of water, took a sip, and said, almost casually, You remind me of someone. Should I be flattered or concerned? She was the last person who thought she could beat me in my own game. What happened to her? She lost. Their eyes locked. The room grew colder. Then I'll be the first. He laughed, low surprised. For a moment, he looked almost amused. Careful, Isadora. The people who try to fix me usually end up broken. Good thing I'm not here to fix you. Then what are you here for? She stood slowly, to win. And with that, she walked out, her heels clicking like a countdown. What she didn't see was Alonso leaning back in his chair, fingers steepled under his chin, a flicker of something dangerous behind his eyes. She wasn't playing the game. She was changing it, and he couldn't decide if that thrilled him or terrified him. By the end of the week, the challenges escalated. Impossible deadlines, hostile meetings, tasks with no instructions, just vague expectations and zero tolerance for error. And yet, she didn't falter. She anticipated moves before they came, handled pressure like steel forged in fire. The employees began to watch her differently, not with judgment, with awe. Whispers turned to respect. Curiosity turned to admiration. And Alonso Del Valle began to lose sleep. Flashback. A younger Alonso, no more than 23, sits in a courtroom. His suit too big, his hands clenched. Across the aisle, a woman. Elegant, powerful, unforgiving. You'll never be ready, she tells him. And you'll never be enough. He doesn't answer, just stares, burns the moment into his memory. The judge bangs the gavel. Case dismissed. The woman smirks, walks away. Alonso never saw her again, but he made a vow that day. No one would ever look at him like that again. Back in the present, he opened his phone, searched Isadora's name again. Still nothing. No social media. No digital trail. Who was she? Where'd she come from? Why was it so hard to look away? The game had begun, but neither of them knew. It wasn't just a game anymore. It was war. And soon, it would turn personal. The weekend arrived, but the building didn't sleep. Neither did Alonso. At 2:47 a.m., he sat alone in his penthouse office, city lights stretching below him like a kingdom, one he had built brick by ruthless brick. Normally, this view brought him peace, power, the comforting silence of being untouchable. But not tonight. Tonight, his empire felt off balance. Because of her. He didn't understand it, couldn't explain it. A part of him hated her, hated the disruption, the challenge, the way she mirrored something he thought he'd buried decades ago. Another part of him couldn't stop thinking about the look in her eyes, that mix of fire and ice, strength and grief, like she had lived 1,000 lives and walked through every one of them alone. He typed her name again into the system, Isadora. Still no last name, still no record before her application. Her references were vague. One employer, a non-existent consultancy, no digital footprint, no photos, no LinkedIn, not even an Instagram. She was a ghost, but ghosts always come from somewhere. And Alonso wasn't just curious now. He was obsessed. On Monday morning, she arrived early, too early, and noticed it. Something was different. Her desk had been touched. The pen was out of place. The notepad, slightly moved. She sat down slowly, pretending not to notice. Her instincts, honed over years of surviving in hostile rooms, screamed quietly in the back of her mind. He was digging. She opened her drawer. Nothing missing. Except one thing. A photo she never kept visible. One she always hid behind her folders. A small, worn picture of a woman in a hospital bed, smiling faintly despite the oxygen tubes. Gone. She didn't react. Just closed the drawer gently and looked at the frosted glass of Alonso's door. You want to know who I am? She thought. Fine, but you won't like the answer. At 11:15 a.m., he summoned her into his office. No words, just a buzz from the desk phone and the cold click of the line going dead. She entered. No folder, no laptop, just herself. Alonso was seated, arms crossed, watching her like a puzzle he couldn't solve. I asked HR to find your full name, he began casually. She didn't sit, and they couldn't. That's unusual. Not really. I legally dropped my surname 2 years ago. Why? Because it belonged to someone who didn't deserve to have it carried. A father. A beat. Something like that. He tilted his head. You're hiding something. No, she replied, stepping closer. I'm protecting something. He stood, slowly, walked around his desk. Now, they were inches apart again. Tell me, Isadora, what is it you think you're doing here? Working. No, that's not it. You don't need this job. You don't care about the money. You're too precise, too intentional. You're here for me. And if I were, then I'd ask why. She smiled, but it wasn't warm. Maybe because men like you never look in the mirror unless someone forces them to. He let out a breath. It wasn't a laugh. It was a warning. You're playing a dangerous game. So are you. But the difference is, I know the rules. You're just now realizing you're not the one who made them. Later that night, Alonso stood at the bar of his apartment, drink in hand, watching an old security feed from years ago, from a hospital hallway. A girl, maybe 11, silent, watching him argue on the phone. He had forgotten that day. Forgotten her. But now the memory came back sharp as broken glass. She signed the papers. She knew the risks. If she dies, that's not my fault. And the girl had stared at him like a blade. No tears. Just fury. No, he whispered, nearly dropping the glass. It can't be. He pulled out the old file from the hospital settlement. The name of the patient. A single line at the bottom. Relative, Isadora Martinez. His hands trembled. He hadn't just hired a rebel. He had hired a ghost from his past. One he had wronged. One who had come back to make him pay. The walls were closing in. Alonso del Valle had faced corporate titans, survived economic collapses, dismantled empires with a phone call. But nothing, compared to the fear that now sat quietly in the pit of his chest. Not because he was weak, but because for the first time in years, he didn't know what move to make. Isadora Martinez. The name hit him like a slap from the past. He remembered the case. A small clinic. A failed drug trial. A desperate mother who had signed documents she barely understood. She thought she was saving her life. She was sealing her death. And Alonso, well, back then, he was hungry. Cold. Merciless. He had been the one to force the hospital to settle. No apology, no accountability, just signatures and silence and one little girl in the hallway. Eyes like loaded guns. And now she was back, grown, smarter, strategic, and seated directly outside his office. But she never said anything. Not a word, not a threat, not even a hint that she knew. That was what terrified him the most. She wasn't acting like someone out for revenge. She wasn't dramatic, emotional, chaotic. She was calm, too calm, like someone who didn't want to make noise, but bury you in silence. Over the next week, Isadora's influence in the company grew like wildfire, quiet, efficient, unstoppable. She uncovered a multi-million-dollar miscalculation in the European division's logistics. She redesigned an internal system that had cost the company thousands in errors. And during a heated executive meeting, she corrected Alonso in front of everyone. With elegance, not arrogance. The room froze, but he didn't fire her. He didn't say a word, because, deep down, he knew she was right. And worse, he needed her. The board noticed. At first, they whispered, "Who is she? How did she get here? Why is Del Valle listening to her?" Then they began to question his judgment. He's distracted, softened, off balance. And they were right. Because Alonso, the man who ruled through fear and dominance, now found himself watching her when she wasn't looking, wondering, remembering, regretting. One night, after a brutal 12-hour day, Isadora found an envelope on her desk. No name, no handwriting, just a wax seal, the kind used for confidential legal files. She opened it slowly. Inside, a document. Original. Old. Yellowed at the edges. Her mother's consent form. The one she had begged for years to access. The one the hospital had refused to release. And a note. "I was wrong. I'm sorry. Hey." Her fingers trembled. She stood, walked to the glass, staring out at the city. The apology felt like poison. Too late. Too clean. Too easy. She wasn't here for sorry. She was here for truth. For accountability. Flashback. A courtroom, 12 years ago. The lawyer representing the hospital, arrogant, young, persuasive, had turned to the jury and said, "There is no evidence this trial caused harm. These accusations are emotional, not legal." Isadora, sitting behind her dying mother, had clenched her fists so hard her nails drew blood. She looked up at the man in the suit. He was already walking out, victorious, indifferent. One day, she whispered, "You'll remember me." Back in the present, she closed the envelope and placed it in her drawer, locked it, then sat back down at her desk, as if nothing had changed. But inside her, something had cracked, not from rage, from hesitation. He remembers. He regrets. But does that change what he did? She didn't know the answer. Yet, inside his office, Alonso sat in the dark, whiskey untouched, tie loosened, watching her through the glass. He knew she had received the envelope. He also knew she hadn't come and talk. That silence between them now felt like a wall neither one dared to breach. Because if they did, everything could collapse. It started subtly. A glance held too long. A question asked with less sharpness. A moment of silence that didn't feel like tension, but possibility. Neither Alonso nem Isadora quiriam admitir. Nema els mesmos. Ok estava crescendo ali. Entre confrontos e estrategias. Mas o que nas no meio do odio. Flores em terreno perigoso. One morning, as the city stirred under gray clouds, Isadora arrived to find a steaming cup of coffee on her desk. Her coffee. The exact order. No note. No explanation. Just that. She stared at it for a moment, unsure whether to be touched or suspicious. Probably both. She sipped it anyway. Behind the glass, Alonso watched, pretending to read. They spoke less, but felt more. In meetings, their eyes met across the room. A flicker of something unsaid. At one point, during a tense board discussion about a controversial acquisition, Alonso cut a senior executive off mid-sentence. "We'll follow Isadora's proposal," he said, without hesitation. The room went silent. Isadora blinked, surprised. Not because he agreed, but because he trusted her. The whispers started again, louder this time. She's sleeping with him. She's manipulating him. No one gets that kind of power without giving something in return. But they weren't. Not yet. Still, Rumors have a way of infecting reality, and sometimes becoming a prophecy. Late one night, well past midnight, they were the last two in the building. He stood in the hallway, coat in hand, hesitating by her desk. She looked up, eyes tired but steady. "You should go home," she said softly. Home stopped meaning anything a long time ago. She paused. That's a sad thing to admit. Truth often is. A silence stretched, not heavy, just full. Then he added, "You remind me of someone I once knew. Is she dead?" "No," a beat. "But I killed her anyway." Isadora's eyes didn't leave his. "You still think you're the villain in everyone's story, don't you?" "No," he looked away. "Just yours." She stood, slowly, walked toward him, stopped inches away. "You're not the villain, Alonso," she said, voice almost a whisper. "Then what am I? Someone who doesn't know how to forgive himself." He swallowed. The room felt smaller, warmer. He looked at her, not as a rival, not as a threat, but as a mirror. And what he saw scared him, because for the first time, he saw a future. She stepped back. The moment broke. "Good night, Mr. Del Valle." "Good night, Isadora." She left, and for the first time in his life, Alonso stood in an empty hallway and felt truly alone. Flashback. A young Alonso, sitting on the floor of a luxury apartment, drinking cheap whiskey. A voicemail plays. "You don't love anyone but yourself. You're incapable of it. And one day, that will destroy you." Click. Silence. He throws the phone. Now, in the present, he wonders if it was always true, or if someone like her could prove it wrong. But feelings are a luxury in war, and the war wasn't over. Not yet, because buried truths still waited to explode. And the closer they drew to each other, the more dangerous everything became. The storm didn't begin with thunder. It began with an email. Subject line: "Who is Isadora?" It spread like fire. Forwarded, whispered, screenshot, speculated. Attached, an anonymous tip. Claims. Scans of old documents. A photo. Blurred, grainy, but unmistakable. A child in a hospital hallway. A woman on life support. A settlement signed by a woman named Martinez. A corporate seal from Del Valle Industries. By 9 a.m., the entire building buzzed like a hive on the edge of collapse. Executives whispered in corners. Assistants exchanged glances. The HR floor practically caught fire. And Alonso had already read the email 5 times. His hands were cold. He didn't need to verify it. He knew it was real. He remembered the day, the hallway, the echo of his own voice saying, "That's business." But now the business was bleeding, not just because of what he did back then, but because of who was sitting outside his office now. And everyone knew it. Isadora stepped into the building like nothing had happened. Her head held high, her pace calm, but inside, she was shaking, not with fear, with fury. Not because people were judging her, but because she hadn't been the one to expose it. Someone else had pulled the trigger. Someone wanted to humiliate her. But they forgot one thing. She had already survived the worst humiliation of all, watching her mother die, alone, because of men like Alonso Del Valle. At 10:17 a.m., she was summoned. Not by Alonso, by the board. 12 cold faces in a colder room. She walked in, shoulders squared, hard and iron. "Ms. Isadora," began the chairman, "we've received troubling information." "Is that so?" "You failed to disclose a conflict of interest, a prior case involving this company." "That wasn't a case," she replied. "That was my life." They stared, unsure what to say. So she continued, "Yes, my mother was involved in a medical trial under Del Valle Pharmaceuticals. She wasn't properly informed. She died, and this company buried it with a settlement in silence. You should have told us." "I didn't tell you," she cut in, "because I wanted to prove myself without your pity, without the shadow of a victim's story." "And what exactly are your intentions here, Ms. Isadora?" The room went still. Justice. A pause. A breath. A tremor in the air. Then, "You're fired." The voice came from the doorway. Deep. Measured. Unmistakable. Alonso. He stepped into the room, every inch the commander of the storm. But his eyes were unreadable. Isadora's chest rose, not in fear, but rage. "Fired," she said, voice low. "You should have told me," he said, "from the start. Would you have hired me if I had?" "No." "Then I was right not to." He turned to the board. I'll handle this internally. Alonso, the chairman tried. I said I'll handle it. The room fell into obedient silence. Back in his office, the doors closed behind them with a hiss. Isadora stood still, but her eyes burned. So this is it. The great Alonso del Valle, solving everything with dismissal. I'm protecting you. From what? The truth. From them. You think they care about justice? They care about headlines. And you? What do you care about? He didn't answer. She took a step forward. You don't get to play savior now. Not after everything. I know, he whispered. I know I'm the last person who should defend you. But I will. She stared at him, confused. Why? He met her gaze. Because I can't lose you. The air shattered between them. But there was no time to feel. Because as they stood there, facing each other, someone else was watching. Someone who had sent the email. Someone who wanted more than exposure. They wanted destruction. And they weren't finished yet. Every empire has its cracks. And sometimes, all it takes is one whisper in the right ear for the entire structure to crumble. While the building reeled from the revelation about Isadora's past, another force was moving quietly through its corridors. One with more ambition than scruples. One that had been waiting, watching, for the perfect moment to strike. And now, that moment had arrived. His name was Mateo Calderon, nephew of the chairman, graduate of nowhere special, yet promoted with alarming speed. Smiles like silk, lies like perfume, and most importantly, he hated Alonso del Valle. Not openly, but behind closed doors, his envy boiled like poison under polished skin. For years, Alonso had been the untouchable king. Now, thanks to the Isadora scandal, his crown was shaking. Mateo intended to rip it off and wear it himself. In a secret meeting with 2 board members, Mateo laid out his plan. He hired a woman with a conflict of interest. She humiliated him. Publicly. The stock is already wobbling. Investors are nervous. It's time for new leadership. The board hesitated. But Alonso's built this company. On fear and silence. Mateo interrupted. And look where that got us. And what about the girl? Mateo smiled. We let the press devour her. Make her the symbol of corporate corruption. And when Alonso tries to defend her, he goes down with her. The plan was elegant, cruel, and already in motion. Meanwhile, Alonso and Isadora sat in the quiet of his office, neither speaking. For once, there was no game between them. Only the truth. You should leave, he said, voice tired. There's still time, before it gets worse. I didn't come this far to run. You came here for revenge, Isadora. Admit it. She didn't deny it. But somewhere along the way, something changed, she said softly. He looked at her, not with power or control, but with fear. You changed me. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of things they weren't ready to say. That evening, Isadora received a package at her apartment. No name, no note, just a black flash drive. She plugged it into her laptop. Video files, surveillance footage, boardroom conversations, snippets of conversations with Mateo, plans, timelines, voice recordings, and then, the final nail. Once she's out, we'll take Del Valle down. From the inside, she froze. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was a coup, a calculated, methodical effort to destroy everything. Her, Alonso, the company, and replace them with something far more corrupt. Her stomach turned. She had come to dismantle one monster and uncovered something worse. She rushed back to the office, past midnight, rain soaking her clothes, her heart pounding with every elevator beep. Alonso was still there. Of course he was. He looked up as she burst in, eyes wild, holding the flash drive. We need to talk. What is it? It's not about us anymore. It's bigger. Who sent it? Doesn't matter. What matters is this. She held up the drive. Mateo's trying to destroy you, and me, and take everything. For a long time, he said nothing. Then, slowly he stood. Then we burned the whole plan down. Flashback. A much younger Alonso, betrayed by a mentor, humiliated in a press conference. His reputation ruined. Everyone said he was finished. He didn't sleep for 3 nights. Didn't eat. Just sat in silence. Until one morning, he looked in the mirror and said, never again. Never again would he be caught off guard. Never again would he let someone take what was his. Until now. Back in the present, Alonso turned to Isadora. You were supposed to be my downfall, he said. I still might be, she replied. But first, let's take down the real enemy. For the first time, they were no longer on opposite sides. They were together. Enemies turned allies. Hurt turned hope. And for the first time in a long time, Alonso Del Valle didn't feel alone in the fight. But little did they know, Mateo already had his next move prepared. And this war was far from over. War, when fought in boardrooms, doesn't explode with bullets. It implodes with secrets. And this time, Alonso Del Valle was no longer playing defense. He was going to burn Mateo's ambitions to the ground. But he wouldn't do it alone. Not anymore. The office at dawn was a strange kind of beautiful. Glass walls tinted gold by the rising sun. Silence echoing louder than words. Alonso stood by the window, dressed in his sharpest suit. But for once, his posture didn't scream arrogance. It carried something heavier. Resolve. Isadora entered, already in motion, a file in one hand, a cold determination in her eyes. "It's all here," she said, placing the folder on his desk. Financial mismanagement. Internal communications. Mateo's name linked to a shell company feeding off Del Valle accounts. How long has he been doing this? Over a year. He was just waiting for the right scandal to use as camouflage. Alonso nodded slowly. "He wanted to use you to take me down. Use us." Isadora's jaw tightened. "Then we'll use him to clean the rot." The plan was bold, risky, brilliant. Alonso called an emergency shareholders meeting. No warning, no agenda. He simply said, "Something is poisoning this company, and it's time we cut it out." By noon, the top floor was filled with investors, legal advisors, and the full board, including Mateo. He walked in smugly, wearing a grin polished to perfection. But the second he saw Alonso and Isadora standing side by side, something in his face flickered, just for a second, then vanished. "So," he said, settling into his chair, "what's this all about?" Alonso didn't speak. Isadora stepped forward and pressed play. The room darkened. A projection screen lowered. A video began. Mateo's voice filled the room. "Once she's out, we take Del Valle down. From the inside. The board's already divided. All we have to do is push Alonso into defending her publicly. He'll look compromised, emotional, weak. And when the stocks crash, we take everything." Gasps. Eyes widened. Silence, thick like smoke. Then came the documents. Bank transfers. Fake vendors. A paper trail linking Mateo to millions siphoned from internal funds. He stood, panic flickering in his eyes. "This is fake. This is fabricated. You can't prove. It's already been submitted to legal," Alonso interrupted. "And to the press. And to the Financial Crimes Authority." Mateo went pale. The board didn't move. They didn't need to. He was already finished. Security escorted him out within the hour. He didn't scream, didn't protest, just looked back at Isadora with venom. "You think you've won? You're just a girl with a sob story. He'll turn on you too. That's what he does." She didn't flinch. "Then I guess we'll both find out." After the room emptied, Alonso remained. Isadora lingered. "You didn't have to do this," she said. "They're still going to talk. About me. About us." "Let them," he replied. "I'd rather be questioned for standing with you than respected for standing alone." She didn't expect that. Not from him. And just like that, the ground shifted again. That night, they didn't go home. They stayed in the office, not working, just existing. Two souls with battle scars. One trying to forgive himself. The other trying to decide if revenge had been enough. "I came here to destroy you," she said quietly. "And instead you saved me," he replied. A pause. Then, "Now what?" she asked. "Now," he breathed, "we figure out what to build from the ashes." But outside the office, in the silence of a nearby hallway, a phone recorded every word, and someone else had just found a new weapon. It began with a ping, then a buzz, then the silence before the explosion. Alonso's phone vibrated at exactly 6:03 a.m. He opened it, eyes half closed, and saw the headline. CEO admits to needing controversial employee. Secret audio exposes personal relationship inside Del Valle Industries. The article was already viral. Attached, a short clip. His voice. Clear. Undeniable. "I'd rather be questioned for standing with you than respected for standing alone." Then hers. "I came here to destroy you. And instead, you saved me." Looped. Twisted. Weaponized. Out of context, it sounded like everything they feared. By 6:15 a.m., news anchors were dissecting every word. Business analysts were questioning ethics. Stockholders were panicking. Blogs called it the romance that brought down a titan. And worse, the video had been leaked anonymously. But Alonso knew exactly who had done it. Mateo may have been gone from the board, but his poison was still in the walls. Isadora heard the news while brushing her teeth. Her reflection froze mid-motion, toothpaste on her lips, hands trembling. She didn't need to finish watching. She knew what they had taken, what they had twisted. This wasn't about her mother anymore. This wasn't even about Alonso. This was about her. Her voice, her choices, her truth, and how the world, once again, had tried to rewrite it. She arrived at the office and was met with silence. Not the usual don't speak to Del Valle silence. This one was worse. Judgmental. Heavy. People stepped aside in elevators. Avoided eye contact. Some whispered loud enough for her to hear. She slept her way to the top. He's lost his mind over her. She's dangerous. She said nothing. Not because she didn't have words, but because if she opened her mouth right now, she might scream. Alonso stood in the middle of the boardroom, alone. TV screens behind him blared the latest updates. Sexual favoritism and corporate power. Del Valle empire at risk. Isadora Martinez. Angel or assassin. He didn't flinch. He'd been crucified by the media before. But this time, it wasn't just his name on the fire. It was hers. He picked up the phone. Clear my schedule. Then another call. Give me the legal team. And the press liaison. We fight now. But Isadora had other plans. She walked into his office, slammed the door behind her, and tossed her phone onto his desk, the screen still glowing with headlines. I'm not hiding, she said. You shouldn't have to. I'm not just your employee anymore, Alonso. I'm the story. And if we don't control the narrative, they will. He stood, stepped toward her. Then what do you propose? We speak. Together. One time. One interview. Live. They'll eat us alive. Maybe. Or maybe they'll finally listen. To what? She looked him dead in the eyes. To the truth. That night, Alonso and Isadora sat across from the most feared journalist in the country. Cameras rolled. The world watched. And neither of them flinched. She spoke first. About her mother. About the past. About her decision to come to Del Valle. It wasn't revenge, she said. It was survival. It was justice. And somewhere along the way, it became something more. Then he spoke. About guilt. About change. About her. She came to destroy me, he admitted. And maybe she did. But what she built in the ruins was better than what came before. The interview went viral. Not because it was scandalous, but because it was honest. Two flawed people. Two broken pasts. One shared future. Undefined, but real. But not everyone was ready to forgive. Because while the public fell in love with their honesty, the board prepared one final blow. A secret vote, behind closed doors, to remove Alonso from power, permanently. And this time, no truth might be enough to save him. The boardroom was colder than usual, not because of the air conditioning, but because of what was about to happen inside. 12 chairs, 12 suits, 12 silent judges, and Alonso Del Valle, standing at the head of the table, not as a tyrant this time, but as a man who had something left to lose. Behind him, the city stretched endlessly, but for once, he didn't feel above it. He felt exposed, human, and worst of all, replaceable. The chairman cleared his throat. This vote is not about personal vendettas or emotions. It's about the integrity of this company, and whether or not you, Alonso, still have the board's confidence to lead. After everything I've done, Alonso replied, everything I've built. Empires don't last forever, the chairman said. Not when scandal burns through public trust. The vote was simple, majority rules, and the numbers were already leaning. Alonso knew it. He could see it in their eyes. Eyes that once respected him, now loaded with calculation. And maybe he deserved it. Maybe this was the price of all the people he'd stepped on to get here. But he wasn't angry for himself. He was angry because Isadora would be collateral damage. Her face, her voice, her truth, all reduced to a headline in someone else's war. Across the building, Isadora watched from her desk. The clock ticked. Her heart pounded, and her instinct screamed. This wasn't just about him anymore. This was about everything she'd fought for. Her mother, her voice, her power. If they took Alonso down now, the narrative would write itself. The manipulative woman who seduced her boss to the top. All the truth in the world wouldn't matter. Because people don't hear the truth. They hear what fits their story. And she was done being someone else's villain. She stood, walked, fast, straight into the boardroom. No knock, no warning. Every head turned. The room froze. "You're not allowed in here," snapped one of the directors. "I don't care," she said. "This concerns me." Alonso stood, surprised. "Isadora, let me speak." She turned to the board. "You want to save this company? Fine. But don't do it by burying the only man who tried to change it from the inside." "He compromised protocol," the chairman said. "No, he compromised ego. Yours." "Ms. Martinez, this is highly inappropriate." "You know what's inappropriate?" she cut in. "Letting a man like Mateo Calderon poison this place for years while you all turn a blind eye. And now, punishing the only one who exposed him. And what do you expect us to do? Ignore public outrage?" "No, I expect you to tell the truth." She took a breath. Her next words were soft, but final. "Fire me, not him." The silence that followed wasn't disbelief. It was awe. "What?" Alonso stepped forward. "Isadora, no. If I leave, maybe the scandal dies. Maybe you get to stay. And maybe this company keeps the one person who's finally trying to make it human." Her voice broke, just slightly. "I came here to hold you accountable, Alonso. But now I'm asking them to hold me." She turned to the board. "This is the only chance you get to do something decent. Take it." Alonso looked at her, really looked at her, and everything in him wanted to stop her. But she was doing the one thing he had never learned to do. Sacrifice. The board voted. Alonso remained. Barely. Isadora was gone. Just like that. No press release. No goodbye party. No second chances. She packed her things in silence. Walked past the same people who once whispered. Now they were quiet. Out of guilt or admiration or both. Alonso waited at the elevator. "You didn't have to do that." "I know. Why did you?" She looked up at him, tired but unbroken. "Because I believe in the man you're trying to be, even if I can't be around to see it." The elevator doors opened. She stepped in, and Alonso let her go. For the first time in his life, he chose not to hold on. Flashback. A hospital bed. Her mother's hand, weak in hers. "Don't let bitterness take your life. ISA. Take it back." Now, as the doors closed behind her, Isadora knew. She had done exactly that. 3 months later, the world had moved on, as Ella Semper Faz. New scandals, new headlines, new targets. Del Valle Industries stabilized. Stocks recovered, and Alonso Del Valle changed. Not in press releases, not in flashy interviews, but in ways no one expected. He started showing up to meetings early. He listened more, spoke less, fired less, praised more. He rebuilt the ethics department from scratch, launched a scholarship program for young women in finance, and, quietly, without fanfare, created a foundation in the name of a woman he'd never met. Camila Martinez, Isadora's mother. No one asked him to. No one even noticed. But he didn't do it to be noticed. He did it to remember, to honor the wound that turned him human. Isadora moved to the coast, far from boardrooms, far from cold elevators and glass offices. She worked with nonprofits now, helped whistleblowers tell their stories, used her voice not to rise, but to lift. She rented a small apartment by the sea, painted again, wrote again, smiled again. But every now and then, usually at night, when the city lights blinked faintly on the horizon, and the waves whispered secrets only the broken understand, she thought of him. It was a rainy afternoon when they met again. Not planned, not staged, just fate. A book launch, a friend, a room full of voices. She turned, and there he was, not in a suit, not surrounded by power, just Alonso, hands in his pockets, hair a little longer, eyes still haunted, but softer now. She didn't smile. Neither did he. Not yet. He walked toward her slowly, carefully, like someone afraid a dream might vanish if he moved too fast. "You look different," he said. "So do you. Better or worse?" "Real." A silence. "Comfortable this time." "I read your article," he added. "The one about women who burned down the systems that failed them." She tilted her head. "And you forgot one thing." "What's that?" "Some systems don't need to be burned. They just need someone brave enough to break them open." She stared at him for a long moment. Then finally, a A smile. Soft. Earned. So, what are you doing here? He looked around. Shrugged. Following my curiosity. Still a dangerous habit. Only when I follow the wrong people. Another silence. But this one bloomed with possibility. You never called, she said. I didn't want to interrupt your peace. You were part of it, you know. The pain. The closure. The change. He stepped a little closer. Do I get to be part of what comes next? She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Because sometimes, forgiveness doesn't arrive with trumpets. It comes quietly, like rain on old wounds, like a glance that says, I see you, I know you, and I don't hate you anymore. They didn't kiss, didn't make promises, but they walked out of the building together, side by side, no longer enemies, no longer strangers, just two people, wrecked and rebuilt, by pain, by truth, by each other. And as they stepped into the rain, it didn't feel like an ending. It felt like a beginning. Sometimes, all it takes is one voice to break years of silence, one heart to choose truth over revenge, one soul brave enough to face the past and still believe in the future. Maybe today's story reminded you that even in places ruled by fear, God always finds a way to raise someone who speaks with courage, someone who doesn't back down, someone like Isadora, someone like you. If this touched you in any way, subscribe to the channel, not just to follow stories like this, but to remind yourself that even in a world full of noise, your voice matters. And hey, before you go, drop a comment and tell me which city you're watching this from. I'd love to know where in the world these stories are reaching hearts. May God bless your life, your voice, and your next chapter. See you in the next one.